Is God real? And what about Santa Claus or carbon? You see, different people can take different sides of these arguments to argue whether each of those things are real or not real, right? And they can list a bunch of logical reasons, maybe list a bunch of facts, and in fact, the truth of their position could be so obvious to them that they will be surprised as to how anyone wouldn't really believe their position. Why would they have to go through so much struggle to prove that God exists or God doesn't exist, right? And these debates could take an endless form, and literally in the history of humanity, people have been debating similar issues for as long as we can remember, right? Well, one good way to settle these sorts of metaphysical debates comes from pragmatism. Now, as we go deeper into pragmatism, what's going to happen is that the question of reality of something kind of like fades out in the background. And instead, what gets highlighted over and over again is the idea of, well, what are you going to do with it? Like, not necessarily why do you even ask, but it's more in lines of what difference does it make? So the truth question sort of loses weight in comparison to so what question. And that is the essence of pragmatism. One good way to introduce pragmatism is actually read from a chapter in William James' book, in which he takes a walk and then he encounters a scenario which could have been solved by pragmatism. But before doing that, we need to do one more thing. Let me show you some charts here. This is going to be a Bitcoin chart. And even though this is a philosophy video, we're going to spend some time here. This is not a trading video. It never will be. So if you happen to be here just because I mentioned the word Bitcoin and now the algorithm is promoting this video, whatever, you're not going to get rich by watching this channel. But if you stick around long enough, maybe you will start questioning your sanity. For those people who don't know what this chart is, this is the price of Bitcoin, and every candle represents what happened in one particular day. And the green candles show that the price went up, and the red candles show that the price went down. What you need to know is basically that when the price is going up, this lower part, starting of the body, this big rectangle, this is the opening price, like the first price of the day. And this other side of it is the last price of the day, or the closing price. And then this little line here, this is the upper wick, and which is the highest price inside that day. And then this is the lower wick, small here, the lowest price inside that day, right? And the red ones are kind of like the flip of that, the opposite of that. So price goes down. So here we start at the top, which is the beginning of the day, and then this is the last price of that day, the closing price of the day. And this wick here, this little line here, is the highest price, and then something small here would be the lowest price. Now, we were just talking about God and Santa Claus and pragmatism, right? A question of reality. So I ask you here, do you see these three little candles? This is 17th of December, 18th of December, and 19th of December. Can draw a rectangle here, a supposedly random rectangle on the chart. Let's call it a gap or a fair value gap. Let's just call it a gap. Is this gap real? This is the question I want to answer at the end of the video. So now let's go to William James and see if his insight can actually help us resolve these metaphysical debates. So now I'm going to be reading from William James because I just find the text to be aesthetic. So let's see. Lecture 2, What Pragmatism Means. Some years ago, being with a camping party in the mountains, I returned from a solitary ramble to find everyone engaged in a ferocious metaphysical dispute. The corpus of the dispute was a squirrel. A live squirrel supposed to be clinging to one side of the tree trunk, while over against the tree's opposite side, a human being was imagined to stand. So the person wasn't even there, they were just imagining a person being there. This human witness tries to get sight of the squirrel by moving rapidly around the tree, but no matter how fast he goes, the squirrel moves as fast in the opposite direction. and always keeps a tree between himself and the man, so that never a glimpse of him is caught. The resultant metaphysical problem now is this: does the man go round the squirrel or not? Welcome to philosophy, ladies and gentlemen. He goes around the tree, sure enough, and the squirrel is on the tree. But does he go round the squirrel? In the unlimited leisure of the wilderness, discussion had been worn threadbare. Everyone had taken sides and was obstinate. That's a difficult word. And the numbers on both sides were even. Each side, when I appeared, therefore, appealed to me to make it a majority. Mindful of the scholastic adage that whenever you meet a contradiction, you must make a distinction, I immediately sought and found one as follows. Which party is right, I said, depends on what you practically mean by going round the squirrel. If you mean passing from the north of him to the east, then to the south, then to the west, and then to the north of him again, obviously the man does go round him. For he occupies these successive positions. But if, on the contrary, you mean being first in front of him, then on the right of him, then behind him, and then on his left, and finally in front of him again, well, it is quite obvious that the man fails to go around him, for by the compensating movements of the squirrel makes, he keeps his belly turned towards the man at all time, and his back turned away. So basically what it's saying is that you have to define what you mean by going around something. You cannot just assume automatically that everybody is on board by the definition of going around something. For example, if there is a scar on the belly of the squirrel and you want to see it, you're failing at that, right? But if you wanted to draw a fence around it, in that sense, then you would accomplish the task because you have gone round the location that the squirrel is in. So that's what it's trying to say here. Make a distinction, and there is no occasion for any further dispute. You are both right and both wrong according as you conceive the word to go round in one practical fashion or the other. Right, and then he continues with basically saying that the people that were hot-headed in that debate, they expressed a kind of dissatisfaction. They felt like it's a cop-out. He's just dodging the real problem by just boiling it down to a definition. But obviously he doesn't think, and according to William James, so this is the real story, and according to William James, most of his friends were convinced that this is the problem, and so. This is how pragmatism can start making sense to settle debates that are, you cannot just settle them any other way. And by putting the human back into the conversation. And by human, I don't necessarily mean like human beings, yes, like because we are human or we're doing science. What I'm referring to is really the epistemic agent. If some aliens are doing that, a particular kind of science, then they also would be limited to their own sort of definitions and characteristics that they have. Now, with this sort of way, when we ask whether God is real, well, of course you have to answer what do you mean by God, but you also have to answer what do you mean by real, right? If I ask you, is money real? Well, let's say, I don't think most people would believe in leprechauns. Like if I ask, are leprechauns real? They will say that, nah, they are not. And if I were to ask, is the chair real? Then most people would say that, yeah, the chair is real. Like, I can see it, I can touch it, I can interact with it. Other people can do the same, right? So the chair is real, the leprechaun isn't. And maybe some person can tell you that. So maybe we have to start thinking about the reality of something as a continuum rather than a binary. So money in that sense would be somewhere in between, because we all interact with money, but we all know that the money is not like a dollar bill or a euro bill. It's like more of a concept, really. So you have to clarify what you mean by reality. So if you go back to our Bitcoin chart again, which is here. So I'm asking whether the gap is real. Is this gap, is this random rectangle on the chart real? Well, we can see it, right? We can all see it. We can all play with it, but it's a chart. It's on my monitor, and the transactions for Bitcoin or any other instrument, they are not in this format. They're not in terms of graphical shapes and rectangles. They're just a bunch of numbers. And this is a visual representation of that. So is it real? Is it not real? Well, the pragmatist would tell you that you're just shooting yourself in the foot. It's a kind of a silly question to get too deep into the reality of it. When I'm trading, when people are speaking about the price of Bitcoin, these sort of stuff are real. People work with it, right? People make money based on it, based on people lose money based on these things. The market reacts to it. Look what would happen if so. This is the 30th of December, 2024. Look what would have happened to this random rectangle as the days go by and the price sort of puts new price. Look what happens here. Just touches it and goes down. Is this random? Just this random rectangle happens to reject the price? Or what about its middle point? This random rectangle does have a middle point, doesn't it? What happens in the days that follow that particular event? Is this random? I don't know. I mean, if you're smart enough, you can make anything sound like anything, but it kind of appears as if the market recognizes the existence of this rectangle that I just randomly put on the chart. So what does it tell you? Is this thing real? Well, it is real when I'm dealing with the Bitcoin chart. It is not real, or its reality is kind of irrelevant if I'm taking a walk on the mountain and debating a squirrel with my friends, right? So so the reality, what I'm trying to say, can be conceived of as context dependent, as local, not as something grand. But then here, the realist, or most of us actually, would have this urge to question, yeah, it's all and good, like Bitcoin chart good, but like the table is there, man. Like if everyone were to die today, maybe the Bitcoin chart wouldn't have any meaning anymore. Maybe it doesn't really exist. It's not real in that sense, right? But the chair would be there. That's what physics tells us, right? So there is something there that is really real. Well, that is because most of us, on the one hand, have this intuition of reality. I'm going to argue later in a later video that this intuition of reality itself is an evolutionary sort of adaptation. And on the other hand, we are never taught in school or college or anywhere else to consider other kinds of metaphysics like pragmatism. And pragmatism could be watered down into just a solution to some kind of problems. But the pragmatism that I essentially would want to talk about here goes much deeper than just defining our concepts sort of better. So whether the chair is there or not assumes that there is a reality in a way that is so independent of our minds and the way that we concept and observe, we put things to concept and observe things, that it is just there regardless of whether we are there or not. And well, that is called scientific realism. And that is a topic for another video in which I will try to gently attack scientific realism and take issues with it, and to tell you that this idea that there is this completely mind-independent reality out there is misguided at best.